Paula, thanks for coming in this morning. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk to you about TPR. I know I've given you the manual and you've had a chance to read it. What I want to do today is to talk a little bit about why we think TPR is so important and to walk through with you the steps of introducing TPR in your classroom this year.
Okay, that sounds great.
We brought TPR to the school because we weren't satisfied with how children were learning Hebrew in our setting, and that they weren't having positive, happy experiences, especially as they went into older and older grades. We wanted to make Hebrew more fun for them. We wanted them to like it, and we knew that TPR was what we would call a brain-friendly way of acquiring Hebrew. So what I want to do today with you is first respond to any questions you have based on your reading of the manual, then go over some of the key points in a TPR lesson, then talk about how we use the manual, and finally demonstrating some of the techniques for TPR. Okay? So let's start with any questions that you have based on your reading.
Okay, so I looked through the curriculum. It seems really interesting. It's very different from any other way that I've ever seen Hebrew taught before, or taught it myself, and I was wondering why TPR, I guess. It seems very, very new and very different.
So what were some of the differences you noticed?
It was there. First of all, the emphasis on not having students try and speak was very different from anything I had ever seen before. There's a lot of movement, and it seems very playful, which is great. But I don't. It's almost a little bit uncomfortable just because it's so different.
Well, you've identified 3 of the key ideas about TPR. Let's talk first about the not speaking. If you think about a baby and how a baby learns his or her mother tongue, how many months of just hearing the language before the baby begins to even try to make sounds. And we think that that is a key to learning a second language as well, that if we push the speaking too early, it actually interferes with the child's ability to learn the language.
Okay.
We want the children to have massive input before speaking, just as it happens with the mother tongue. The second is the issue of movement. We know from a lot of research that movement actually bonds memory, that when you do something while you're hearing something, it helps you remember it longer. And again, think about a baby. When a baby, all the early encounters with a baby revolve around doing things. Give me the bottle, pick up your toy, come to mama. The language is experienced in movement, and that's another thing we try to bring into TPR. And the last point that you mentioned, that TPR is playful, and that's something that is also an important aspect of TPR, that we learn better in an environment that is playful, low stress, fun, and think of the things you like to do or the things you do that come to you more easily. And so we want to create that environment in the classroom. So I'm glad that you picked up on those things because they are critical to TPR. Let's turn to the manual, and it's the TPR lesson and teaching techniques piece that I want us to look at first. In your book, it's on page 14.
Okay.
This section of the manual talks about what has to happen in teaching TPR, and I want to highlight some of the aspects of this. And it's for you to think about as you go about planning your lesson. The first point is that you really need to think through and write out a lesson plan and a learning script. Now, why is that so important? Any thoughts?
So it would seem to me that that would, allow the class to flow better if I know what I'm going to say next, and then I can make sure that I know how I'm going to incorporate new commands, and how I'll review the old ones. It will, make the class flow better.
Exactly. And in addition, it will free you to use your mental energy on observing the children, because the key to moving forward in TPR is sensing when the children have really acquired the new vocabulary well enough to move to the next lesson. So if your focus is on what do I do next or what do I say next, you're not going to be able to watch the children. You really need to be so comfortable with the script that you are almost doing it on automatic pilot. And that is a challenge, because a lot of times we go in the classroom and we have an idea of what we want to do, but we really haven't thought it through to such a degree. So this is something that we want to emphasize. We also want you to think the second point about the environment around which you're teaching. If we want to help the children learn by creating a background that will help them help reinforce the new vocabulary. So if you're doing vocabulary around Shabbat, for example, you're going to have pictures and artifacts, candlesticks, challah, kiddush, in the room to help them learn the words. If you're using movement, you might have pictures of children jumping, walking, running, playing, because this peripheral learning is also very important to the learning process. We talked a little bit already about how to create a playful environment and a safe environment. No child is going to be made to feel, oh, I'm dumb at this, I can't do this. Children are going to be encouraged at whatever level they are to move forward. Just as with a baby, we don't say to a baby who mispronounces a word, that's not the way to say it, listen, say it again, say it after me. We honor partial success, and we encourage them to move forward. And when it comes to individual lessons, after the first lesson, we always start with a warm-up using previously heard commands. Why do you think that happens?
Well, I would imagine that we need to reinforce the old commands. They haven't heard them in some time since we last met. And so if they're really going to retain them, they need to continue to hear them, and not just hear them once and then move on.
Right. Exactly. In addition, what we're really doing when we use those old commands is we get the brain active, the synapses firing around these Hebrew words so that they're more ready to hear the new vocabulary as well. This is a very important lesson in general. They haven't heard about Purim for a whole year. We walk into the classroom and we say, what do you remember about Purim? And you get blank looks. But once you begin to talk about Purim, then they begin to remember. So you're doing that with the repeating of the commands. You also need to use the old commands in novel ways, ways that they haven't heard before. So if you've told them to sit on the chair, now you might want them to sit on the table or sit on the floor or sit on somebody's lap or sit on somebody, because they have to have that flexible use of language in order to make it real. Another important thing to remember is that we vary how we work with the group. It's sometimes with individuals, sometimes with small groups, sometimes with the entire class. When we work with groups, we want to make sure that the groups are pretty heterogeneous, that we have strong kids with weaker kids as well. You're checking for comprehension all the time. How do you do that?
I guess by watching the students, especially if I'm no longer modeling a command, but I say it and then most of the students are performing it without looking at me, then it would seem that they understand that command pretty well.
Exactly. We introduce new terms usually in sets of 3 new terms at a time. How many we can do in one lesson depends on how long we're with the group, the capacity of the group. But when we introduce new terms, it's 3 at a time. Sometimes we do 2, and especially in the very beginning we do 2. But 3 is preferable because it forces the child to really make a distinction, whereas if it's only 2, if I say lakum lashevet, then it's just one or the other, and they have a 50% chance of being right. But if I say lakum lalechet lashevet, then they really have to stop and think and process, and that's what we're looking for, is the internal processing. So we're introducing only 3 terms at a time. Too many terms will be overwhelming. Not enough terms, it's just like on automatic pilot. No expectation of verbal response until they've had about 10 hours of exposure.
Okay.
And one of the ways you know when the children are ready to speak is you will hear speak emerge naturally. For example, I can remember a classroom where the teacher said lalechet, and one of the children started to run, and one of the kids said lo la roots, lo la roots. The speech came naturally, just as it naturally emerges with a child. So we're looking for signs of naturally emerging speech. In my experience, I often hear from parents who say they're hearing the children speak at home before we even hear it in the classroom. So you're looking for little signals. And finally, responses are always received with enthusiasm. Yofi, kol hakavod, mchiat kapayim, yafem ma'od. We want the children to feel success, because the more success they feel, the more they will be eager to learn. Okay?
Okay.
How do these ideas sound to you as compared to conventional teaching?
They sound good. I mean, it's still very different, but it sounds exciting, and it sounds like it can be a lot of fun.
Good. So let's now go to how we use the manual. And the manual, the lessons are divided into levels, and levels are divided into segments. If you turn to page 22 in this book, which is level 3 of the foundational level, you will see that a level is divided into segments, and each segment might have 3 new words. And how do we know the new words? They're in bold. But we have the old words on the page so that it is easier for you as a teacher to know what words I can count on they're already having learned. As soon as they get the 3 new words in the first segment, you can move on to the second segment. In the beginning of the manual, we write the entire script for you. After you reach level 3 or 4, we expect you to begin to write the scripts on your own, using the earlier scripts as a model. Once you get to level 4 in this foundational level, you can also begin to introduce units from the holiday units and the synagogue units, and the manual will tell you what words need to be reinforced before you can go to that. And how do we choose those? It's based on the holiday calendar. It's based on your social studies units. You have to adjust that to your own curriculum.
Okay.
Okay?